am a volunteer here with Real, and I'd like to introduce our speaker. His name is Gershoni. He is the founder of Gershoni Creative, a creative agency based in San Francisco. For more than 30 years, Gil has transformed big ideas into impactful designs, campaigns, and activations for brands such as Google, Apple, Spotify, and Nike. In 2017, Gil launched Dyslexic Design Thinking. It's an initiative that teaches intellectually curious people how to create, collaborate, and problem solve using the dyslexic mindset, which I'm going to guess he's going to talk about today. Dyslexic Design Thinking encompasses a podcast called Dyslexic Design Thinking, a postcard project, Dear Dyslexia, which when you're done listening to him here, you can go look at what he does in the exhibitor hall. An art exhibit called the Dyslexic Dictionary, which I missed and I'm really bummed out about, in San Francisco, and a thought leadership with Gil regularly speaking on the topics of dyslexia and design to audiences nationwide. Welcome, Gil.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today. I don't know how many of you heard Sam earlier, and I felt that it was like his sort of definition of the dyslexia gift is really a foundation to my talk. So I thought it's kind of worked perfectly. You know, maybe the first thing I'm going to do today is start with a classic icebreaker. You know, I would love for you to turn to somebody you don't know, introduce yourself by your first name, and listen carefully. I want you to tell them one thing that you're not good at. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do it. Go ahead. Turn to each other and introduce yourself. Do you know each other? So you know what he's not good at? Right on. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, how was that for everybody? Have you guys ever introduced yourself to a stranger with the first thing that you're not good at? Was it inspiring? Would you like to do it again? Well, I'm Gil, I'm dyslexic, and reading and writing is not my strength. I have a design and branding agency in San Francisco, and for the last 30 years, I've been working with organizations, schools, individual nonprofits to help them tell their story, okay? And today I'm going to talk about how to reframe, rebrand our neuroindividuality, and primarily for me, my dyslexia, okay? When I start to work with organizations about how to rebrand or tell their story or tell their identity, the first thing I do is I look into assumptions. So I figured today is probably good to start with what is dyslexia defined by the dictionary. It's a learning disability, processing language that has to do with reading, writing, and spelling. It's important to know that dyslexia, like everything else, is a spectrum. There's many different types of dyslexics. I'm not as good an actor as the Fonz. I'm never going to sing as good as Cher. And I'm not the founder of a billion-dollar organization like Richard Branson. But my strength comes from my dyslexia. My strength were made possible because of my dyslexia. It's important to know that 1 out of 5 are dyslexic. 66 million Americans are dyslexic. Just think about the amount of dyslexic and neuroindividuality in our community. It's also important to know that 35% of American entrepreneurs are dyslexic. Learning disability, 1 out of 5, 35% of thinkers in the entrepreneurial space are dyslexic. Traditionally, we define dyslexia with what we cannot do, rather than what we can do. Today, I would love to talk about how to reframe my dyslexia, your neuroindividuality, and see the strength that comes from that perspective. It's important to know that I'm dyslexic through and through. I'm a whole person. You know, as we start today, we can talk about what I'm not good at. But what does that have to do with my whole person? You know, and why do we focus most of our time with things that are giving us the challenges versus giving us the strength of being our best selves? It's a lot easier for me to work through my differences when I start from my strength-based model. When I'm seen through my community, my parents, my partners, my collaborators, my client, with what I can do. In my podcast, I interview a lot of different individuals that are dyslexic and neuro individuals in different industries. Just recently, I had an opportunity to sit up with Nicole. Nicole works in the intersection of neuroscience and mindfulness. I love the combination of both the neurosciences and how the mind works, but also being present, being in the mind, being your best self, being present. She was mentioning this two different ideas that really stuck me. One is that we're all neuro individuals. I love that term because it means like we all individuals and we all have different brains. Just like our fingerprints are unique, our brains are also unique. None of our brains are the same. So when we're talking about the curve, where we are with it, it's a misnomer because we are individuals and we see the world around us in a different way. You don't have to be dyslexic to be different. So, what is dyslexia really? Dyslexia is a hyperability, and as a dyslexic, I can make up words. You would never find that words in a dictionary. I can spell them any way I want because I'm creative, just like Shakespeare. It was an interesting fact that Shakespeare never really spelled the same word twice and made up words because he was talking about creativity, language, humanity, stories. We gave him the freedom to do so. So hyperability is the way we look into insights, the way we think, create, and relate to one another. My disability has made me really good at what I do. It took me a long time to get to this perspective to realize that my disability is actually my strength. Hyperability is born from taking perceived weaknesses and developing a relationship with it, to be able to reveal the extraordinary capability that it offers. Often we try to stay away from our disabilities, from our differences, and what happens when we do that, they get louder, they get bigger, they chase us. But when we surrender to them, when we have a relationship with them, they become our friends, and often they become our strengths. So let's look at what the disability looks like first. C-A-T, the word cat. For you, most non-dyslexic, these are non-negotiable symbols or letters. And when you look at the word cat, probably in the first thing in your mind's eye, you're seeing the cat on your right. I wanted to create an infographic so you guys can kind of see how the subject and the objects compute each other, create an invisible relationship, and understand what's going on in the blink of an eye. When I see the word cat, I see it kind of like that. My mind sees through the letters, below the letters, above the letters. I see A, T, C, two T's, upside down, 3D, and no matter which way my brain computes it, I don't see a cat. What I have to do in order to see a cat is I have to suspend my gift of dyslexia. I have to hold so tightly to the letter C. If I'm lucky to make it to A without seeing 4 or 5 triangles, I can hold it in my mind and then I can jump to T. And if I can hear it in my back of my mind as I'm speaking to myself, I see a cat. But at that moment, my dyslexia goes on hyperdrive and I see more than a cat. I see patterns, I see fashion, I see nature, I see friendship, I see community, I see my favorite cat. I see the story behind the words more than just apparent to the eye. You take the same disability with the letters, and you take my cat, and you stick it in the bag, And for you out there that are not dyslexic, I made sure that the tail sticks a little bit further so you know it's a cat. And I use the same disorientation as I do with letters. I see above, below, through, all at the same time in a blink of an eye, and I can tell you 100% there's a cat in the bag. What I'm doing is I'm using my disability, I'm leaning into it, I'm using the gift of dyslexia in order to see the invisible solutions out there. So I guess the cat is out of the bag. So let's talk about dyslexic and how we think differently. You know, as a dyslexic, I've been working with my team around the world, around working with different neuro individuals about how do we bring our different neurodiversity to the work we do. And today I'm going to talk about 3 things that I do that consider to be my disability and how I lean into it and to make it my hyperability. And I work with other neuro individuals to mind meld our differences. So together we can reach better outcomes. These are 3 tools that really stands out when we're looking at how I see letters. So the first one is turning disorientation into orientation. When I look at letters, it's disorienting. And I have to work so hard, and I'm sure you individual, your children, have to suspend their gift of seeing through objects, leaping through ideas, in order to be able to just come up, with a single idea or the single word that's written down. So I'm going to talk about how I lean into disorientation to reorient. Seeing everything is negotiable. I never see the same word the same way twice. I never read it twice. I never think of ideas the same way twice. They're always new because my mind leaps around ideas and thoughts. And the last one is embracing the beginner's mind. Turning disorientation into orientation. We all experience disorientation. You don't have to be dyslexic to experience disorientation. You know, maybe you were driving here and you got lost. That probably felt a bit disorienting. Maybe you met a new person or came into a room and emotionally something triggered you and you feel disoriented. Or you're speaking to a room of folks that you never met and you're trying to sort of share, and maybe that's disorienting. Disorientation is not a bad thing. It's how you regulated your disorientation that makes all the difference. This is an art piece that we created for the Dyslexia Dictionary when I was trying to express how my mind works and how I always get stimulated through different ideas, color, textures, and words. Disorientation without a relationship is disorder, but I disorient by choice. I create environments in our studios where I immerse everybody on the team into the way I see the world. You know, I remember meeting with some of our designers and strategists and project managers and ask everybody to print their research, to print their ideas, to print their words or graphics and print them on the wall. And in the beginning, it's like, why are we doing this? It's on the computer. We don't need to do this. But I asked everybody to do it, and they had to cut all the piece of paper and they glued it around and they put Post-its on it and they took strings and started to connect things. And before you realized it, you were inside of the idea. You're feeling the thought, you're feeling the different neuroindividuality and the way we're solving problems. It became so addicting that now every time I say, well, I don't know if we need to do it, everybody wants to do it because you kind of get inside of this 3-dimensional world and you start exploring the different way we see each other. You know, the writers move some graphics, the graphic designer moves some words, and together we start to formulate what is the problem and how we're going to solve it. Turning disorientation into orientation has to do with how we see the world around us. When you guys look at your watch, you see time. But when I look at the watch, I can see all the parts of it. I can see the gears, the springs, the screws. I can suspend time. I can slow down and see through, above, and all at the same time. And I can tell you where there's a discord, where there's a disability, where there's something in this mechanic that is just a tiny bit off. And it can be as small as the smallest tinker of a screw that sort of puts the clock back into time, and you can see it again. So when we're trying to solve a problem, we're trying to slow down to see all the pieces and immerse ourselves in the environment around us. So how do we do that? First and foremost, ask yourself, where are you? And what are you doing? Not what you think you're doing, and not what you assume you are, but what is the environment around you? Be present, get grounded, use your whole body to sense the world around you. Look around and sit in it. Sit in the discomfort of not knowing, because that's where the relationship begins. I love this metaphor of how a pilot flies a plane. The pilot knows where they take off and they know where they need to land. And as they take off, all they're doing is looking at the instruments, looking at the weather, looking at the conditions, and they adjust every moment of the flight. Not only to land the plane on time, but it's the most efficient way to get there, because they're not fighting the environments. They're embracing the conditions and they're creating a relationship with it. Turning this orientation into orientation has to do with slowing down. My brain processes so fast that I used to think that when I have to slow down, I have to sort of meet a different individual with different neurodiversity in order to relate to them. But what I realized, by slowing down, I'm able to see a lot more. I'm able to embrace my environment. This is an art installation that we did for Deloitte. And they were interesting for us to create a visual exploring what it is to be in the cutting edge of innovation. What it is to sit in the discomfort of something new. Because when we're talking about embracing our differences, embracing our disability, is you have to sit with something that maybe doesn't feel as comfortable as things that gives you that joy. So we illustrated this beautiful young girl on a swing 30,000 feet up in the air. And this piece is massive. So when you come to it, you literally feel the vertigo of being on the cutting edge. Mind you that the cutting edge of anything is how you get to innovation. That's how you invent new things, how you look at the world around you and try to find new solution for old problems. Dyslexic are really good at that. I interviewed Sally Gardner. She's an author from the UK. I don't know if you know her. She's phenomenal. And the podcast with her was super inspiring. And there's a few things she said that really stuck out to me. The first thing is that she really embraced this orientation. She loves to sit in it because it calms her down. She's able to regulate her dyslexia. She's able to sit in her disorientation and listen to the character she's writing. One of her techniques to understand the story arc of her character is she would take their characters to lunch. And I was like, what do you mean? Literally? She's like, yeah. I go to the cafe, I'm writing about a persona or a character, and I would sit there, and just in my mind's eye, I would talk to the character and ask that character, is this the right story? Is this the right clothes? Is this the right shoes? And these characters disagree with me. But she's listening. She's listening to what the story is and not trying to force it. And she's like, the characters are always right. If I'm trying to write something that's wrong, they would yell at me. And one could say like, well, she's maybe a little, crazy, but in the best possible ways, I've done the Dyslexia Dictionary with Sally. We've done a bunch of different global art projects together, and she wrote this amazing poem for the Dyslexia Dictionary where we end up printing it again as large as this wall. And the one sentence in that poem that really stuck with me is not how you spell the word that matters. It's what you have to say that counts. And every time I think about that, it makes me think about myself as a little boy, my son, my community. Can we teach them to think differently, no matter how they spell it, so they feel their strength and confidence and inner light? A few years ago, we were invited to redesign the Charles Schwab Learning Center that helps students with dyslexia and learning differences, both for Stanford students as well as some of the surrounding high school and such. I was so impressed with their methodology. It's really looking at learning through strength-based models. And I met the team and the teachers and some of the students and walked around the space. If you guys don't know, Charles Schwab is dyslexic and he's also a Stanford graduate. So him supporting the community this way really meant a lot to me and to the community at large, as we start to talk about it, we start to realize that even the words learning center emphasize that maybe something is different, something is wrong, something needs to be fixed. But what was taught to the students is how to be their best selves. So we started thinking, why not create an environment that stimulates your dyslexia, that celebrates your differences, that allows us to be not a place to be fixed, but a place to learn how to be a better dyslexic. A place that allows you to then sit with other fellow dyslexic and narrow individuals and learn how to be your best self. Almost like an innovation lab for dyslexic, you know? And it made so much sense to me because when we're thinking about Stanford and the Garage and HP and Apple and all the other innovation company, why not create a space that we can take the next generation of entrepreneurs and thinkers and empower them to be their best self, to celebrate their differences. If you haven't been to the center, you should definitely check it out. You know, some of the walls showing you how we see letters and how they shape, metamorphosize into shapes, which the way I see graphics, they're all negotiable. So, instead of looking at the way it's spelled, what can we do with those letters? On the windows of the space, we wrote some messaging that was all fragmented, but as soon as the sun hits it, the light on the ground spells it correctly. So you're able to feel how dyslexics see the fragmentation of letters and celebrate how they come together and fall apart. It's just perception, And likewise with color. When I look at color, I see a spectrum. I see a range of possibility. They never end because my mind always leaps through new ideas, always find new ways around it. I wish this center was available when I was a kid, because I think that would have been a little easier. Although with my mom, she was so creative. She said to me, as long as you try, you never fail. At least you know what you're good at and what you're not. So I learned to fail, because if you don't fail, you don't try. And if you don't try, you don't know. And if you don't know, then how is that working out? So for me, failure was always the idea that I know more than I did, and what do I do with it? Sam was talking about it earlier. Find a way to be comfortable with trying, But the worst going to happen, I'm not that good as a pianist, but I'm good in other things. So it's not about negotiability, The second tool that I want to talk about today is seeing everything as negotiable. It's not about negotiability, it's about seeing everything as negotiable, trying to find almost what is your inner resistance. What do you assume that's not negotiable, that you are using as a framework to see the world around you? Somebody codified it. Somebody thought we can do it quicker, faster, run faster, make it to the moon, invent a phone with no buttons, invent an automobile, invent a light bulb, by the way, all dyslexics, because they felt that they can be negotiable. They can find another way through. They can find a different solution and suspend, the laws or the ideas that are holding us back. This is an art installation that we did for the Dyslexia Dictionary, and I was really interested to find a way to show non-dyslexics how do dyslexics see the world around them. So I started with a very simple premise. Is the cup half full or half empty? And as you look at the water in the glass, and you look at the text behind it, you kind of start to see how I see the world around me. It doesn't have to be just copy or text or words. It's everything. Because my dyslexia is driven by curiosity. And when I feed my dyslexia, I want more of it. It's addicting. What if? What if it goes there? What if it goes here? So as we sort of visualized it, and we saw multiple of these lenses and these glasses, we start to realize that it's neither half empty or half full. Those are the boundaries. Those are the non-negotiable construct that we all come to. For dyslexic, it's both. For dyslexic, it's not half empty or half full. It's through the glass, through the lens, that the world transforms the possibilities. And that's where, for me, the negotiability begins. Whenever I think that it's not doable, stop. Why? Who said so? I'm going to show you. We're going to reinvent. We're going to think about it differently. I was trying to think for myself when I was a little boy, when did the first time I learned this? Because I didn't find that to be like a common thing as a young boy, sort of going on and said like everything is negotiable, and I was like, so I remember my grandfather, I was probably 6 years old, first grade or so, and I always loved to hang out with him. And he would even say, go play with the kids. I was like, no, Grandpa, I want to go with you. I want to learn how you do business. Back in the day, well, these days we call it entrepreneur. He was just a hustler, He just loved people, loved relationship, and loved to make deals, So I would always stick around and go with him. And at the time we went, on the way to the office, we stopped at the farmer's market. And there was an organic farmer's there with all these great apples. And we were going to buy a few apples. And my grandfather started to talk to the merchant and asking about his family, the weather, the soil. Is this a good season? Did you get enough rain? And then he started to negotiate the price of an apple. And now I was 6 years old, but I was pulling on his sleeve and like, Grandpa, it's an apple. Pay the gentleman the price. And he pulled me aside. He's like, no, I'm not negotiating the price. It's about the value of the relationship. Now I know this man. I know what he puts the effort toward it. He only bought apple from this farmer. And every so often he would get a free apple, but it was never the point. He created a relationship and understood the other person first. He learned to negotiate and listen first before he had his assumptions about this person's life and what he's doing. My grandfather has these kind of relationships throughout his life. And it always inspired me to first find out, how is it going for you? What's your world looks like? Where can we help? How can we flow? When there is a lack of discord that we need to shift. I'm always looking at what my assumptions are, right? Creating the boundaries. What are non-negotiable? How do I look at the way I look at letters? Through, above, below, all at the same time, and apply it not as a disability, but as a hyperability. When I look at the world around me, I'm trying to suspend it. I'm trying to find out where there's lack of flow for myself and for my environment. I do everything I can not to solve the problem. And you can imagine as a creative director with a branding agency, when my client comes to me and says, we needed to solve a problem, and the first thing I say is, I'm going to do everything I can not to solve it. They don't fully understand what I'm talking about because, wait a second, aren't we paying you to solve the problem? I says, yes, you are, but you're paying me to solve the right problem. If you knew what the problem was, you wouldn't need me. You know what the indicator that's not working for you, maybe you're not flowing, maybe it doesn't create an opportunity for your business, your community, your nonprofit. But that's just an indicator. It's a symptom. Let's follow the symptom down and find out where is the discord, because when we find the problem, then we can solve it in half the time. The goal is to find our truth. The goal is to find the source. The goal is not to run away from the obstacles, the problems, the discord, the disorientation, or the disability. You have to embrace it. I'm a whole person. My disability is my strength. I disorient by choice. I try to be more dyslexic everywhere I can. I try to feed my dyslexia because it gives me the strength with the mind I have to see the world around me differently. I interviewed Dr. James Kinroth. He's a surgeon out of UK. And first and foremost, I was like, a doctor, a surgeon, dyslexic? How did you ever get through school? How did you overcome? And he worked so hard just to try to get through it. He will be the first one to tell you that he's not only a great surgeon, but he's also an amazing artist. And what he does, because he has, his dyslexia is both the right and left side of his brain, he uses them both. So pre-surgery, what he would do is he would illustrate the surgery. Not as a scientist or as a doctor, but as an artist. He would spend time and render it and color it. And then he would put music to it. Surgery has pre-doing in the middle and at the end. So he would coordinate with all of his senses how he's going to make this dance happen. And then he brings the rest of his team. Some dyslexic, some not. All narrow individuals. And then they sit together in the room. They all meditate, close their eyes. They look at the illustration. They listen to the music. And they get aligned. They mind meld. They bring their differences together in order to be a stronger group to go through the dance of the surgery. I would invite you to listen to him. He was so inspiring and such a generous man. But just blew me away with how he does it. And I haven't met anybody else that does it his way due to his dyslexia, you know. So my last tool for today, embracing the beginner's mind. You know, for me, I can look at those letters and I never see it the same way twice. And it can be super frustrating, you know. It can be the kind of thing that, you know, why can't I do it? I remember when I was a little boy, I was writing a little essay. I was maybe 3rd, 4th grade. And in the same paragraph, I spelled the same word 3 different ways. And my mom was like, whoa, that was so creative. Like, she's like, how can you think of the 3 ways to spell the same word? You know? She's like, is there any other way to spell the same word? And we just went, and I just wrote it in 10 different ways to spell it. We celebrated the fact that I saw the possibility that it was new again, you know, because it didn't matter. Now I learned that there's one way to spell it that everybody else agrees, but the way I spelled it originally was probably a little bit better. It was more authentic. It was creative, you know, and made my mom need to do what I do, is to say it out loud and decode it and be like, oh, I understand what you're trying to say. My wife does it all the time. I combine words that don't exist. She's like, whoa, that's even a better outcome than what I knew it was, you know? And then sometimes I still feel a little embarrassed. And I was like, well, not sure how to spell that, but it sounded right to me. It felt right to me. But instead of trying to run away from it, I'm embracing it. I'm sharing it, you know? Now, you know, with my team, Zilia's here and others, I inspire them to say, how would you do it differently, you know? How do we look at the problem in a different way? You know, I know we just almost solved the project. You know what? Forget it. Let's do it again. Some of them get very frustrated when we do that. But for me, it's like, can we see it in another way? Can we get underneath the story to get to that essence? Can we celebrate that? And you know what happened when you do it as a team and we work with our clients is they fall in love with our process, you know, because they feel that we're coming from a very authentic place, a genuine place. We all have our strengths and differences, and we're embracing them as well. You know, we promote failure. We promote trying and not succeeding because it's the only way to discover. So it becomes a safe place, you know. You know, in order to be creative commercially, you know, people come to us and says, I need a campaign by the end of the week. You know, we're launching a Spotify brand globally. Can you do it? And when I was younger, I would be so stressed out. I was like, oh my God, we got to get with the best idea. But what I've learned is that if I just relax, my dyslexia naturally empties my creativity. In order to be creative, like the half full, half empty glass, you have to make room for it, because creativity is about expansion. And if you're saturated, if you have creative block, that means you have no more room for expanding. So what are the practices and routine you do individually, you know, teach your children to do it, that they can ground themselves, self-regulate, in order to make more room for their individuality. This is a mural that we did for the Schwab Learning Center, and when you come to it, it's a massive wall, and right in the middle of that mural, there's a door. You know, and the idea here was that whenever you come to the center, leave your assumptions at the door, because that's the first step to create discord, to fight with who we are. But if we can put that baggage down and start again, the opportunity is endless. You know, we did it so when you wear the 3D glasses, it's 3D. But I want to, again, to play with the idea that this is all negotiable. That, you know, when you see it and you're not dyslexic, you're like, oh, the colors, but you put the glasses on, the whole thing pops 3D. It's all perception. What are we going to do with it? You know, another part of looking at the world from the beginner's mind is the like child wonder. You know, it's very important that we're not looking at the childlike mind from a rudimentary perspective, okay? We all are trying to get back to the moment we were little kids. Nobody judged us. We played in the world. We saw things that moved us, and we were content. As we get older, as we go to school, as we get judged, as we take tests, we start to be afraid to be ourselves, because how are you going to make a living by playing with cards in the sand, you know? But if you embrace the play, the brain relaxes. You move toward what gives you joy. And if you do that, you attract more of it. And when you do that, it's easier then to find more of it. One of the things we do at our agency is we invite play. Some of our more traditional thinkers find it very stressful because there is an hour to finish the deadline. And I said, everybody stop. From accounting to account management to copywriting to strategists and designers and everybody in between. And through all of the floors at the agency, we do 1 minute dance party. I don't know if you guys ever done that. You know, put a song, 1 minute on the clock, everybody dance. And they get so, at the beginning, it was so overwhelming. Like, there's an hour to the presentation, we don't have the time. But as soon as you dance for 1 minute, you come back to your spreadsheets, you see the problem. You come to the solution, you feel the outcome because you relax your brain. You let go of tightening up against what doesn't work. And you said, what if? What if I saw it for the first time? What if I embrace my beginner's mind? This is an image of me and one of our executive producers in Chicago. We were designing a space. And after the space was starting to be designed, I said, let's go outside and let me lift you up to look through the window. By the way, he's not dyslexic. And he's like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, why are we doing this? I was like, trust me. And I shoot him in the mouth, and he looked through it. And I was like, can I bring it out? I was like, no, keep me up there for a little longer, you know, because he was able to see the same space from an angle that you would never seen it otherwise. And after he came down, we went back to the space, and everything we thought we knew, it was new again. And we changed our perspective to make it even more encompassing for learning differences, you know? Did you ever try to look at 2D object with 3D glasses? You know? Or look at the world from a different angles, you know? Get on the same levels as your children and look at what they're seeing, you know? It changes your perceptions. Sometimes I take a hike in the park and I try to sit on the bench. If I look at a bird, I try to almost meditate to be the bird. You know, I want to see how that bird feels embodied in that bird's reality. Again, just to play, to change your perception, to change your boundaries. Embracing beginner's mind. I'm looking to be pleasantly surprised. You can't be pleasantly surprised if you don't take a risk. If you don't embrace something you don't know. So being pleasantly surprised for me is trying to look at ordinary things in extraordinary ways. I remember walking in a park with my son G. He's probably 4 years old. There was a little flower and a little gray butterfly on it. And he leaned down in his little body and he held the flower so gently and looked at this butterfly. And my first reaction is like, that's an ugly butterfly. But then when I look at it and I move to his level and I look through his eyes, he was so astonished. He was so blown away with the reality that through his eyes, I was able to see again that flower in the bud for the first time again. I was able to be pleasantly surprised with an ordinary life around me. And I've learned through him, if I do it every day and I collect it, you see more of it. You find more of these moments and otherwise you just pass through it. Therese Fitzgerald is, for over a decade, she was the vice president of a brand creative for the Sesame Workshop. She was the one responsible creating all the Sesame Workshop worldwide lessons, characters, everything that we grew up, our children are growing up with. She was at the helm for over a decade. As a creator, I was just like, what an amazing job. To look at language, to look at object, to look at letters as a dyslexic and teach our children how to look at that around them, how to regulate their emotions, how to understand how they feel and give them words around it. And I asked her, you've done it for over a decade. Does it ever get old? And she looked at me with a smile and she says, every time I do another lesson, I look at it through the 6-year-old mind. It's always new. It's always inspiring. You know, and I love the way she talks about her curiosity and how the dyslexia mind is a curious mind. And she feeds it everywhere she goes. She just feeds her dyslexia. So, Dyslexic, Dear Dyslexia, the Postcard Project. This is a global art project that I have at the exhibition there as well. And I invite you and your children to participate and check it out online as well. You know, how did I know that it was time to rebrand dyslexia? I asked. I asked over 2,000 children of all ages, as little as 6 or 3 or 4, all the way as 86. And I asked them, what does dyslexia mean to you? You know, and you would expect learning disability, hard, challenging, depressing, sad. But that was the smallest part of the community. Because when we talked about our identity, what else gives you joy? What do you love to do? That's also your dyslexia. Because my brain is a dyslexic brain. So the fact that I can look through objects and I can fly and leap through characters, that's also my dyslexia. So as I start to get these postcards back, I was just blown away with the individual identity stories, but the collective. You know, how people start to sort of see the world around them and embrace and reframe their whole self. So I think maybe it's time for us to sort of reframe a little bit. You know, what I would love for you to do is I would love for you to turn to a stranger, introduce yourself with your first name, but this time, I want you to tell them something you're really good at. But wait, I'm not talking about your degrees, your accolades, your books, your successes. I'm talking about what gives you joy. I'll start. My name is Gil. I'm dyslexic, and I'm really good at doing the dishes. I love it because it's not a chore. It's a ritual. It's a habit. I love putting my hands in the warm water. I love using a lot of soap. I love taking the time with every dish just to get it beautifully back to its cleanliness. But the most important thing that I love about it more is when that dish is clean and I dry it and I look at it, I see my best self in the reflection. And that feeds my dyslexia, regulates myself, makes me present, makes me see for the first time again, and allow me to celebrate my gift and my diversity. So turn to a stranger, introduce yourself, and tell them one thing you're really good at that has nothing to do with your career. Go ahead. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I just want to leave you with this. You know, look at your strengths, look at your differences, celebrate your whole person, and whatever you do, dyslexify your life. You know, we have a few more minutes, so I want to open up for some questions or comments or thoughts from everybody else, but thank you so much for being here, everybody. Really appreciate it.
I would ask you mentioned, and thank you for this inspiring talk about how dyslexia can be used as an advantage. But I still wonder, is there any value of helping people with dyslexia, meaning trying to fix it, trying to tell them, teach them how to read and so on.
Of course. So that's a great question. First of all, I wouldn't use the word fix because I'm not broken. So I think that that's just language. But you know what? We are what we say, and what we put out is what we attract, right? So there's nothing to be fixed by me. But with that said, reading is very important because that's how you get knowledge, right? So yeah, I struggle to read, and I read very well right now. But these days, like when I was a boy, you know, there was no mediums, there's no technology, there's no text or audio or vice versa. So it's really more important to teach our children to be curious and to be curious to learn in their own way. Of course, we have to struggle with reading and writing, and it's an important thing to do, so don't get me wrong. But I'm much more interested to teach my son how to be curious and to be interested in learning and finding the way that he or she learns the best, because then I'm giving him a gift for life. You know, what tends to happen often when we try to fix our children is we remind them that they're broken. And here's the thing is when we erode their spirits and confidence, it can take a lifelong to get it back. I'd much rather that my son doesn't read or spell the best he can, but his spirits and his confidence is high because he can do anything else. But that's a great question for sure. Absolutely. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes. Yes. You know, I love that you said that because, and I think Sam in the beginning, I know who was here for his talk, was talking about all the various type of, different types of smarts, right? Different types of way to see intelligence and see how we look at the world. It's very challenging when you go to the traditional school system and we only look at one way of measuring intelligence. Dyslexic, because reading and writing is difficult for me, I develop a photographic memory. I develop an emotional body that all I can do is see you, and I can sense and feel empathy for you or for what you're trying to say. Like street smart, like seeing the world around you. So developing that in our children as part of their whole persons is a gift for life again, you know? And I love that because I think that I remember when my son was young, we were living in the city, you know, I had to teach him how to know when people are predictable and not predictable. You know, and those are the words we use. Is this situation predictable? And if it is, you can move toward, and if it's not predictable, then move away from it. And it's a life lesson. It doesn't have to be, it's just how you feel, how you see the world around you. But street smart just allows them to be present, aware, and be able to make their own choices, for sure. Yeah.
I came late, so apologies if you hit this at the beginning, but I'm guessing a lot of the other people here, like me, are the parents of someone who has something.
Yeah.
Right, there's a lot of different things with alphabet soup in our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what you're saying is advice to the people, but what about the parents of the people?
Yeah.
If you have advice for us.
Yeah. So, you know, when I look at my son, I'll talk to my personal experience, you know, my responsibility is to see his best self before he can see it. You know, it's part of guiding, right? They're gonna grow on their own. We're just guiding them, right? We're helping them, you know, find the right way to make decisions. You know, so for me, is when I look at those differences, is I always try to find the strength in it. You know, so they can see through my eyes that I believe in them, that I love them unconditionally, that I support them no matter what they do. You know, so for me as a parent is to be able to sort of be part of it, let them lead, ask them what feels good. You know, let them find the things that sort of give them joy and feed it. You know, I was giving a talk in Florida just a few months ago, and a mother came to me and she was very moved. She wanted to give me a hug. Oh my God, that was so meaningful to me and all this. My daughter's upstairs. She wouldn't come down. She's a teenager. She hates this, but she's dyslexic. And I don't know what she loves to do. And I said, well, what does she do when you're not looking? And she says, well, she's always in the backyard with the dogs. I was like, oh. And how did the dog feel? Oh, the dogs, I mean, she can go to the park and 15 dogs come to her. I mean, she just has this thing with the dog. So I was like, what are you missing? What are you missing about what she loves to do? And she looked at me like, it was almost like a paradigm shift because she's like, I kind of knew it, but I thought that what she liked to do had to mount up to a career. But if she loves dog and she can relate to animal, are we questioning what career she's going to go to? You know, maybe a veterinarian. So what should she do next? Volunteer. Get another dog. Go work for the ASPCA. You know, found a mentor that's like works in the sciences with animals. feed their dyslexia, feed their differences, find a way to make them more than make them less, and it's a practice, For me, sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I get it wrong, and I tell my son, you are a teenager for the first time, I'm a dad for the first time. So you're going to succeed, I'm going to fail, but we're going to do it together. And I'm allowing him to tell me, Dad, that didn't work out. You were wrong. And I need to own it because I want to show him what it is to fail. If I can fail in front of my son with confidence, then he's more confident failing too because he knows that it's not the end of the world. We'll do something different. We'll try differently, right? So by action, by behavior, by letting them lead, you're creating an agency and supporting their spirit, I'm sure we can talk about how to parent forever, but I don't know if I answered your question, but that's some of the things that comes to mind. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Yes.
I have a question about, this is a quick one, about self-dyslexia. My daughter was diagnosed with that, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. She's an avid reader, unless you ask her to read that out loud.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know if that's just information, or I don't know if you know anything about it.
Like I said earlier in the talk, is that dyslexia is a spectrum like everything else. And it's really important to know that our children, as unique as they are, and my dyslexia is different than your daughter's and probably everybody else in the room, What I do know from my own dyslexia is that my brain works differently. And interviewing, hundreds of folks on my podcast over the years from different industry, different cultures and backgrounds, there is some commonalities. But again, what the surgeon can do, I can't do. Or, I'm never going to be able to act or be a singer like some other dyslexics. But a lot of the similarities, the way my brain works and how I jump around different things, tend to be some of the commonalities, Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, concern? We figured it out. We all good? All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.